chop it to the beat. Tailgate every Sunday, yeah, we bleed that red and gold. Kansas City Chiefs, it's time to take control. Now stop and do the nay-nay. Scored another touchdown, now it's time to hit the balls. Now stop and do the nay-nay. Scored another touchdown, now it's time to hit the balls. Now hit it.
What's up, Chiefs Kingdom? You are tuned in to the Arrowhead Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Cris Style. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification button. We are here. Regular season football is right around the corner. The roster has been finalized for now. Now, because there could be movements all through the season and things can happen with injuries and things of that nature. But as of right now, with the 53-man roster is pretty much going to be for week one. It is already set. So we're going to get into that, talk about some interesting things that happened, some minor surprises, not too big, but some minor surprises. But before I do all that, first off, I want to give a shout out to Every Morning Quarterback. For you guys who haven't known or haven't heard me, I am in collaboration with Every Morning Quarterback. They are a podcast website where they have built this thing called Locker Room, where they are putting various teams. It's called Fan Access Locker Room, where it's various teams with different podcasts, whether it be the Patriots, I want to say there's a 49er one, there's a Charger one, and there also is myself, a Chiefs one, there's a Jets one, but there's my Arrowhead Chief podcast is going to be the representation for the Kansas City Chiefs. So go check out their website. They got a lot of interesting things. Shout out to everybody over at Every Morning Quarterback. Also, I want to make another huge announcement. I want to welcome my new partner. This guy I've been rocking with for a minute. If you're on Twitter, you pretty much know this guy. He's always in the spaces, creating ruckus, and that's one of the things I love about this man. That's why I asked him to be my new partner for this season, because he's unapologetically himself, and that's what I want. I want to bring you guys authentic product, authentic personalities on this podcast. I don't want somebody who's cookie cutter or just somebody who's trying to portray a role. My new partner, Clarence Newsom, he will be rocking with me for the whole season, talking about Chiefs, bringing you new content. Me and him, we also do another podcast together called I'm Not Hating Podcast. Shout out to the homie developer Ken too. But I just wanted to bring him on. I feel like we have a good chemistry. We bounce off each other, and plus he's a huge Chief fan just like me. So it only felt right to bring in another partner, somebody who I can bounce other opinions, and also to give you guys a different perspective of the Chiefs, because you may not agree with everything that I say on this podcast. So I wanted to give you guys a different perspective, a different personality on this podcast. So shout out to my boy Clarence. We will be bringing you dope content this year. And also, last but not least, I want to give a big rest in peace to Lynn Dawson, Kansas City legend, icon, Hall of Famer, quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, the one who brought Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl, Super Bowl IV. He was the Super Bowl MVP. He also was a big-time broadcaster, known for bringing you inside the NFL. Was a pioneer in that. Was also a Hall of Fame as a broadcaster too. So I just want to give a big rest in peace to Lynn Dawson, and my condolences and my prayers go out to his family. All right, now let's talk about the 53-man roster. Now, I'm going to go through this thing, offense. I'm going to start with the offense, and then on the other side, I'm gonna start with the defense. So let's get into it now. The quarterbacks, we really there's only one interesting thing with the quarterbacks. We all know Patrick Mahomes is QB1. We ain't got to get into all that. We know Chad Henne is QB2, and and the interesting thing about Chad Henne is you can say what you want about Chad Henne, but Chad Henne, they bring Chad Henne in because he's a veteran. He's a savvy, solid veteran. Even though he may not have he didn't have a great preseason. They trust him, and I think that Chad Henne built up equity on this team because of that playoff win against the Cleveland Browns. I know that was a few years back, but I just felt like he built up equity for that to be on this team because you know, he won us that playoff game, and we wouldn't have went to the Super Bowl had it not been for Chad Henne making plays down the stretch in that playoff game. So I think that built up equity for him to stay on this team. But the interesting thing is now they kept a third quarterback and Shane Bichelle. Now Shane Bichelle was with the team last year and he showed potential glimpses. He's a former SMU quarterback, um, but he showed potential and glimpses last year, um, and he was on the Chiefs practice squad last year, but there was a few times where the Chiefs had to protect Shane Bichelle because teams were interested to pick him up. Well, he doubled down this year, and one thing about Shane Bichelle was he was out there in Texas when Patrick Mahomes grabbed all the receivers and went down to Lubbock, Texas, and worked out with all the receivers to get them up to par for the new season. So Shane Bichelle has already built a relationship with Patrick Mahomes. He's built a rapport with Matt Nagy. He's built a rapport with Chad Henne. So, and he went in the preseason and he played pretty well in those preseason games, especially preseason game 2 and 3. He played really well. So, and he's been showing a lot in camp. So, shout out to Shane Bichelle. He went out there and he won him a job, and it was hard for the Chiefs to not keep him on the roster because they knew he was not going to pass waivers. He was going to get picked up by somebody, whether it had been Dallas. I think would have probably put a waiver claim in him. Maybe look at somebody like the Texans or somebody like Seattle, they got Geno Smith, they got Drew Lock, you never know. So uh, it'll be interesting to see how far they can keep Shane Bichelle because there are going to be a lot of movement, and sometimes that third quarterback might not be as important if you need to take a defense. You got to bring up a defensive lineman. Because that's really one of our weaknesses on this team is defensive line. So maybe a Danny Shelton might have to get called up if it's an injury to a Chris Jones, to a Derek Nottie, to a Turk, or to a Colin Saunders. They might have to bring up Danny Shelton. And vice in other maybe one of the cornerbacks get hurt and Najee Johnson has to get called up. So it'll be interesting to see how much they can keep Shane Bichelle on this roster. Another thing, running back. Now we all know Clyde was going to make this team. He's running back one. Jared McKinnon was on this team. The rookie Isaiah Pacheco, who showed potential and was the talk of the rookie class, he ended up showing potential. Um, but the surprise is Ronald Jones. Now, everybody thought, including myself, I thought Rojo was going to get cut because they really didn't give him a chance to really shows up in the preseason and in training camp. You really didn't hear much about him. Now Brett Veach did talk about Rojo as far as making the roster, and he said that the third preseason game he showed what he can do and he showed improved and earned him a roster spot. But I also think that Rojo was kept for insurance. we know Clyde's injury history. We know Jared McKinnon injury history. And you don't want to just, what if both of them go down? You don't want to just have Isaiah Pacheco, because what if something happens to Isaiah Pacheco? You're going to have another guy. So I think also the injury of Derek Gore helped out Rojo too. Um, I just feel like they kept him for insurance purposes. And like I said, Brett Veach talked about it, that a lot of times in training camp, they're a pass, Chiefs are a pass heavy team. So they do a lot of 7-on-7s. And they spend a lot of time in 7-on-7s because it's more passing than running. And they don't do a lot of 9-on-7s, running drills. And you can't really simulate running the football, live football in practice like even with the pads on, you need another opponent to measure running in between the tackles, to measure how good a running back is doing between the tackles. You can simulate so much, but only a live game can really give you the film that you need to evaluate your running backs when it comes to running between the tackles. So that's why I believe Rojo was kept on. I wouldn't be surprised if he's inactive the first game, and unless an injury happens, his number gets called. So also Michael Burton, we're not surprised. They always keep a fullback on. He was on last year. He's shown to be a viable weapon for Patrick too, out of the backfield and running on 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s. So Michael Burton was going to make this team. Now the wide receivers, of course, are Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Miko Hardman, Sky Moore, Justin Watson. No surprise there. Only one surprise. The surprise is they kept 5 receivers instead of 6. Everybody thought that Doris Fountain was going to be retained. We're going to talk about Doris Fountain in a minute, but they made a decision to keep 5. I also think it came down to special teams and what special teams player they chose. We'll get into that in the middle too. But they end up rolling with 5 receivers instead of 6. Tight ends is, of course, Travis Kelsey's tight end 1, Noah Gray, Jody Fortson, Blake Bell. Blake Bell suffered a hip injury, had to get surgery. The word on the street is he is going to go on IR and be out for a couple weeks. Um, but yeah, so that will be a spot open for another position. We'll talk about that in a minute. Um, so they're going with 4 tight ends on the roster, but they'll initially have 3 tight ends on opening day. Um, Offensive line, of course, Orlando Brown, Trey Smith, Joe Tooney, Andrew Wiley, Creed Humphrey. They kept Gary on Christian, Nick Allegretti, who's always been a solid backup. Uh, Prince Tego Wananoga. They kept him, and they kept the rookie 5th-round pick Darian Carnard. Now, everybody thought that Darian Carnard was going to be in the running for their right tackle position, but unfortunately, he hasn't really showed that. He hasn't flashed like everybody thought he was going to, and that's okay. I think that the Chiefs still see the potential in him to, either be he's either going to be a right tackle or he's going to be a solid backup guard tackle. And I just think that he just needs a little bit more development. So I think Darian Kennard will be um, more of a development project. I wouldn't even be surprised if he may get cut, a few times and put on the practice squad or brought up or whatever. But I do think that they just want to, develop Darian Kennard because they see the potential on tape coming out of college. So that's pretty much the offense. Now let's roll with the defense. Let's start with the defensive line. We got Frank Clark, Mike Dana, Carlos Dunlap, Malik Herring, Chris Jones, Joshua Kendall, George Karlaftis, Derek Nottie, Colin Saunders, and Tashawn Wharton. Now, the defensive ends, Frank Clark, Mike Dana, Carlos Dunlap, Malik Herring, Joshua Kendall, George Karlaftis. Um, they kept more defensive ends, and Brett Veach talked about this in his press conference that they wanted to keep more defensive ends because they get a lot of injuries on that side of the ball. We all know Frank Clark's injury history, and he's always getting sick and things of that nature. Um, Carlos Dunlap, he's long in the tooth, so um, he may get nicked up here and there, and he's already coming in with a inflamed heel injury or Achilles injury, which is not something that you want to hear from a older guy, but they wanted to keep more defensive ends on this team. That's why Malik Herron and Joshua Kendo made it on this team, and they cut a few defensive linemen because they kept Derek Nottie, Colin Saunders, Tashawn Wharton, and of course Chris Jones is going to be retained. And they cut both Danny Shelton and they cut uh, Taylor Stallworth, um, which was surprising. We thought, you would keep either or, but they went with four defensive linemen, and they went with one, two, three, four, five, six defensive ends. So they wanted to have more defensive ends for depth purposes, and just in case injuries happen, they have enough guys in the toolbox to put out there. So that makes a little sense. Well, it makes a lot of sense in the world. So, but look up, but we'll talk about Danny Shelton and Taylor Stallworth in a minute. Linebackers, Nick Bolton, of course, Willie Gay, of course, uh, Leo Chenal, and Darius Harris. Uh, they did cut Eli. Uh, uh, what's his name? Sorry. Elijah Lee. Sorry, they did cut Elijah Lee. Now the word is that when Blake Bell goes to IR, they plan on bringing Elijah Lee back up to the 53-man roster. He was starting on the as one of the starting linebackers when he was coming along. Now I do think that they were trying to feed Leo Chenal little by little. I wouldn't be surprised if Leo Chenal is listed as the starter over Elijah Lee. We'll see how that works out. But I do think that they were just wanted to see because in past coverage, Leo Chenal was not, he's not been developed in that area, and Elijah Lee was a little bit better in that situation. But as camp went on and as preseason, you saw the things that they were talking about with Leo Chenal. He has a nose and a knack for the football, so I wouldn't be surprised in the base Leo Chenal is out there, and then in nickel and dime packages, you'll probably see Willie Gay, Nick Bolton, maybe there's and they'll sprinkle in Elijah Lee more so when it comes to nickel and dime packages. So those are the linebackers. Now, cornerback, it goes L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, Rashad Fenton, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and Chris Lamons. Now, Chris Lamons, he's more of a special team. This goes into what I was talking about with Doris Fountain. I think they chose Chris Lamons over Doris Fountain when it comes to being the gunner on special teams. I also think Jalen Watson is going to be a special teams guy. Uh, but I think the starting three, of course, are going to be L'Jarius Sneed, Trent McDuffie, and Rashad Fenton. And Joshua Williams will probably rotate in and out with the Trent McDuffie or L'Jarius Sneed to have that proper rotation. I think Joshua Williams has won himself a few snaps on defense, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see Joshua Williams out there from time to time, especially when it comes to nickel and dime packages. So I don't have a problem with none of the cornerbacks. The safeties, not surprised there. Juan Thornhill, Justin Reed, Brian Cook, Deion Bush. Deion Bush really showed some things in preseason, showed that he's a big hitter. He can step in if one of the guys go down. So, and he's a veteran. He's been around for a minute. So, uh, you feel pretty good if Deion Bush has to step in for one of the guys if they get hurt. And then special teams, of course, Harrison Buttkicker. Tommy Townsend, and James Winchester. So that is the initial 53-man roster. And then let's go to the practice squad. They brought back Zane Anderson, my guard Mike Caliendo, linebacker Jack uh, Coltrane, running back receiver Jaron Ely, wide receiver Doris Fountain. They brought him back, so don't be surprised if he ends up on the 53-man roster from time to time. Najee Johnson, seventh round pick. Azur Kamara, defensive end. Elijah Lee, who will probably get brought up after they put uh, Blake Bell on IR. They brought in a quarterback, Cris Style. Uh, they brought back wide receiver Cornell Powell, who showed more progress during the camp in preseason. Austin Ryder's back. They also brought back Danny Shelton and Taylor Starworth on the practice squad. So that rounds up the pretty much the team from 53-man roster and the practice squad. So really not too many surprises on the practice squad. I mean, maybe the quarterback, he wasn't really. Also, they signed former Missouri and Blue Springs native Kendall Blankton. He played for the Rams last year, tight end, played for the Rams. I think he was picked up. I forgot who he was picked up with because they tried to sign him off of waiver claims, but somebody else picked him up, and then he ended up getting cut initially. So they picked him up. He signed on the practice squad too. So that's pretty much the team. Like I said, the only changes I see being made probably are when Blake Bell goes to IR. They bring up Elijah Lee. He's going to be and he'll round out the linebacker crew, and probably we'll see him on the field. He's earned himself some snaps. He showed promise in the preseason and on and in the camp. So before I go, I also want to talk about two players. The first player I want to talk about is Jody Fortson. Um, I was watching the franchise, and if you haven't watched the latest episode of the franchise, and if you've never heard of the franchise, go check it out. It's one of the best uh, productions that the Kansas City Chiefs have put together since they've started this. I think they started this after the Super Bowl run, or right when the year of the Super Bowl run, if I'm not mistaken. But it's pretty much highlighting the season. It's gonna be all through the season. You watch it, and it just highlights what the team, highlights a player or a couple players. It shows the preseason, shows some training camp stuff, um, and it's just a great thing. Wonderful thing that the Chiefs, one of the better productions that they put together. And this episode, which is episode 3, they highlighted Jody Fortson and everything that he went through in the off season. And what's interesting is the game that he showed out in preseason was the game that against the team that he got hurt. Which is funny how things come full circle, because he got hurt against the Washington Commanders, where they was the Washington football team at the time, but nevertheless, he got hurt against the Washington Commanders, tore his ACL, and it just showed how he never kept his spirits. His mother was talking about how he never kept his spirits down. He had a smile on his face, even when he got hurt. He talked about he just wanted to get to a phone to make sure to tell his people, like, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good, like, we're gonna beat this, we're gonna fight this. And you could just tell, because one thing that we take for granted with these guys is that we expect these guys to be invincible. We expect them to be able to bounce back from injuries no matter what. They got the technology to fix the knees and fix your arm and fix whatever, ailments that they have. But we got to understand that these guys are human, and some guys react to injuries different. Some people, it takes them a couple years. Case in point, Juan Thornhill. it took him a couple years to come back from that ACL injury. And I think that this year, when you watch Juan Thornhill, you're going to see a better version of Juan Thornhill. The Thornhill that we thought we was going to get after his rookie season, I think that guy is going to return. It just takes time when you have injuries for certain people because mentally, it takes time for a person to trust that need. Now, not everybody is Adrian Peterson, who can come back 6 months later off of an ACL tear and break records. So it takes time, and it takes certain people. Certain people. That doesn't mean that they're weaker than the less, or no. It just some people just react to injuries different. You may hurt something on your body, and it may not phase you, and I can hurt the same thing, and it can phase me different. So mentally, it takes people different, and it looks like mentally, Jody Fortson stayed in a good place, and it's showing on the field. He's showing his potential again as a red zone threat, and I'm just excited for Jody Fortson this year. I think Jody Fortson can set himself up nicely with the Kansas City Chiefs. If Jody Fortson goes out there, and let's say, and let's be realistic about this thing. I'm not sitting here saying Jody Fortson's going to have 8, 9, 1,000 yards. But if Jody Fortson can put together 400 yards and maybe six touchdowns, 6, 7 touchdowns in the red zone, man, that would be another weapon in the cog that we could use, especially deep in the playoffs. Somebody that can be a mismatch for linebackers and safeties and corners because he's a big body receiver. That was his. He played receiver first, and he had to transform his body into a tight end, and he's done that. He's initially done that. And I'm excited for Jody Fortson this year. I think Jody Fortson will be a cog and a weapon, especially in third and longs, or even third and shorts in the red zone. We will have more efficiency in the red zone because Jody Fortson will be a red zone threat. So I'm excited to see what Jody Fortson puts together, and I think he can set himself up for a nice, decent contract after the season, even if it's not with the Chiefs, which I doubt it. I think the Chiefs will try to work something out with Jody Fortson. Don't be surprised if, by week 7, if Jody Fortson is out there making plays, they try to work a deal out with him and sign him to maybe a 2, 3 year deal to keep him around a little longer. So, especially with, Travis Kelce, he's getting up there in age, and they're going to need somebody who's going to be a little bit more of a heir apparent. And maybe Jody Fortson could be that, with along with a Noah Gray, they could be a two-headed monster. But like I said, I'm excited for Jody Fortson, and a lot of people, Jody Fortson is a fan favorite. A lot of people love Jody Fortson, so I'm expecting big things for Jody Fortson. Another player, before I get off, I want to talk about is rookie first round pick Trent McDuffie. Now, I think Trent McDuffie, for whatever reason, he gets a bad rap already. Um, because he's not talked about. He's initially a quiet guy. He's not too much of a big personality. It looks like he goes out there, works, does his thing, locks in, and just puts it all on the field. And in the beginning of of training camp, I think a lot of bones was made to old MVS, his big body. He's putting his body on him. And, the knock on Trent McDuffie is what? He's 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", 180 something pounds. He's not the big corner like a Joshua Williams or a Jalen Watson that we drafted, who's like 6'2", 6. One is 6'2", I think the other is 6'3". So he's not the prototypical corner that is needed nowadays. Uh, he's more of a smaller frame nickel, kind of a nickel corner, but he's smart. What he makes up in size is he's smart. He has good football intelligence. He's always around the ball. And this whole, I think it was overblown that MVS was beating him sometimes. I think that there was plays where you saw him breaking up the pass, and it wasn't like he was getting, smoked out there or burnt. He was right there in every play, breaking up plays. I've seen the potential in Trent McDuffie. I think Trent McDuffie is going to be just fine. I'm not worried about him. So for all you guys out there, just know Trent McDuffie is going to be fine. I expect big things from Trent McDuffie, and I think that Trent McDuffie is going to be a stalwart on this defense. I think him, L'Jarius Sneed, and Fenton are going to be a nice three-headed monster in that secondary. And I'm excited for Trent McDuffie. I think Trent McDuffie is going to put together a good rookie season, and I got all the confidence in the world in Trent McDuffie. So that's my time today, everybody. Um, I hope everybody is having a good week. If this is your first time listening to the Arrowhead Chief podcast, you can find us on any streaming podcast app, whether it be Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, Breaker, Apple, Google, um, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find the Arrowhead Chief podcast. You can also find me. I said it in the beginning. You can go to the Every Morning Quarterback website. That's emqpodcast.com. Go up to the top in the menu, click on Locker Room, scroll down. You will see my tab, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. You click on it, all my episodes will come up. You can also find me on YouTube, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. Um, Subscribe to the channel. I'm starting to put all my material on there also. So check me out. Subscribe. You know, subscribe to all channel, whatever you listen to me on. You can subscribe to me on, and you can get any episodes, whether it be the recent ones or past ones, if you want to listen to the past episodes. So check us out, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. Also, if you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and for Facebook, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. That's Chief Podcast on Twitter and on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Arrowhead Chief Podcast. Follow us. Follow us on any social media. We will follow you back. We're not Hollywood. We're just fans like you who just love to talk about Chiefs. So follow us on there. You can also follow myself on Twitter and Instagram, CRISSTYLE. What? CRIS_STYLE 702 on Twitter, and then on Instagram is 70282. Check me out. Follow me. You can also follow my new partner, Clarence Newsom. It's Clarence_Newsom. Uh, give him a follow too. We will follow you back. Excited for the season, Chiefs Keenan. Can't wait. It's right around the corner. We're almost here. And me and Clarence will be here next week bringing you content, breaking down this first week matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. Looking forward to that. So stay tuned for that. All right? Have a good rest of your week. Happy Labor Day. Be safe out there. Love you guys. Let's go Chiefs, get them. Go Chiefs.